Thank you, Madam President. I do want to rise in strong support of this bill, which is another great initiative from Labor, and I do want to congratulate the Shadow Minister for Local Government in the other place, Greg Warren, and my colleague Walt Secord, who is the current Shadow Minister for Arts and Police and Counter-Terrorism in the North Coast, of course, but was formerly the Shadow Minister of Special State, and together they drafted this bill. Now, for the benefit of the House, we might want to go over some of the history of this. This has been around for a long time in concept and both in manifestation. People may recall that back in 2009, the then Premier Rees announced that Labor would not take a single cent of money from property developers anymore. That was at a Labor Party conference, and then subsequently introduced that law to give that policy effect. It was then introduced into law on January 2010, and the High Court actually upheld an appeal against the policy from developers in October 2015 regarding that ban. In 2016, Madam President, the Labor State Conference prohibited candidates from nominating for public office if they were a property developer or a real estate agent. So this has been part of Labor Party policy for quite some time, and what we're seeking to do now is put it into practice, put it into law, given the litany of corruption that we've seen associated with local government and the current legislative framework simply not catering for this conflict of interest. Now, in 2017, again, Labor introduced a bill to reflect that position of banning developers and real estate agents from nominating as candidates for local government elections. That was voted down, Madam President, by the government at the time. So 2017, the bill was introduced, voted down. Now, in 2020, that was February last year, my colleague, the Honourable Walt Secord, introduced the bill we have before us today, which the government indicated it would not support. And we heard in no uncertain terms before the break that that is still their position after all we've seen over the last 2 or so years, as if we didn't need any more examples as to why this bill needs to come in. Now, earlier this year, on top of the 2017 bill being voted down, on top of my colleague's bill not being supported back in 2020, we had the spectacle of the government opportunistically splitting off an amendment to the local government bill. Members may recall that the bill was introduced into this House largely to cater for COVID-safe provisions, but also to address the Strathfield issue, whereby Mayor Dwahi incorrectly filled out his declaration and was found to have done that. And what was the government's answer to this? And this goes to the essence of why the current legislative framework is so lacking, Madam President. I mean, the government whip earlier on in the debate tried to make the argument that it's okay because people have to declare their conflicts, they have to fill out forms, as if we're living in some sort of perfect world of transparency where the public knows what all these conflicts are and that the forms are correctly filled out and no one's playing silly buggers. Well, actually what happened was this fellow incorrectly filled out his form and no one knew about it until it was reported. Then there was a 2.5-year investigation. So the government puts up this bill and their answer was, well, we'll just get head office, we'll just get party office to fill out the forms on their behalf because our candidates are too thick to do it properly. That was how they treated that action down there at Strathfield. Instead of addressing the problem at its source, which is that you remove the conflict by not letting developers and real estate agents run in the first place, the answer was, we'll fill out your form, pat you on the head, you can still run for council. Now, what the government did, members may recall, is split the bill off into two because my honourable colleague David Shoebridge moved amendments which would have achieved the similar thing that we're trying to do here today. Again, banning developers for running for council. So the government split off the bill, got the bit through about head office filling out the forms, and then the bit that contained the Shoebridge amendments, which would have given effect to what we're trying to do here, is still mothballed in the lower house. So we've actually had this is the third go at this. We had the 2017 bill knocked over. We had the Shoebridge amendment to the local government bill earlier in the year, and now we've got this bill introduced again, and still the shutters go up. Still the resistance. I mean, on what grounds do you have to knock back such a simple reform that would make transparency the order of the day, so that the average person in New South Wales, when they go to the polling booth, can feel confident they're actually electing people who have got their best interests at heart, not their monetary interests? It's actually very straightforward and quite simple, and you've got to ask yourself the question, why are they hanging on to this with such dear life? What's the motive? Has it got anything to do with the fact that you're running independents all around the state? People who are not endorsed Liberals? What's all that about? So let's just go back to what happened during all that time. So during that whole period, during the gestation of that first bill, the second bill that was introduced, what, we're talking about 12 months ago now?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. We had, as if you didn't need enough example to tell you why you should do this, we had the spectre of Mayor Dwahi out at Strathfield, who incorrectly or falsely filled out his declaration. Now that declaration, as you all know, as every member in this chamber knows, is meant to provide residents with some sort of guide as to the sort of people they're electing. So if I go onto the website, I can see Mr. Dwahi's declaration. Oh, he's a company director in A, B, C, D, E. What's that all about? Oh, they're involved in developing. Maybe I shouldn't vote for this bloke because he may have an ulterior motive or he's got a conflict of interest. That's the theory.
Yeah.
Well, it was reported to the Office of Local Government that Mr. Dwahi had these conflicts. Now, this is the same bloke who was fined for an illegal development way back in 2013. So it's not like we didn't know this bloke was a developer. So he incorrectly fills out his form, doesn't declare he's a director in a company which has development interests. A complaint's made to the Office of Local Government. It took them 7 months just to launch the investigation. We pursued this on budget estimates. 7 months just to kick off the investigation. Then, by the time they found out that there was a case to answer, I think probably 12 months went by, 18 months, something like that. They refer it off to NCAT. Then NCAT investigate and eventually find that this fellow was in breach and incorrectly declared or didn't declare his interests. There is still no punitive action being handed down. He's been found guilty, but there's no punishment being meted out. Meanwhile, he's sitting on council, on Strathfield Council, up until September this year, making decisions, planning decisions, which had an influence on density and zonings in a local government area where his company actually stood to gain. And those opposite want to stand up and defend this sort of thing as if to say it's one rotten apple in the whole basket. You know, the answer I got from Minister Hancock when we pursued this on budget estimates last month was, I'm unaware as to these investigations. I don't get involved in individual investigations, as if the minister wouldn't have known. And when we've questioned her on her position about banning developers, she maintains that it doesn't necessarily follow because you've got this systemic flaw that we should ban developers and real estate agents. This is the position, colleagues, this is the position of this government. They are actively defending the right of developers and real estate agents to sit on council and not only have a conflict of interest, but manifest that conflict of interest and actually materially gain And this bill would solve that problem. We've got council elections coming up in 3 weeks, and I think the people of New South Wales would like to go to those elections on the basis that the people that they're electing, the candidates up for election, are free from any such conflicts. If you speak to the average person in New South Wales, Madam President, and ask them whether or not they realise that it's actually possible, it's actually legal for people to have such conflicts to sit on council, they're incredulous. They can't believe that this is actually a legal practice. People just assume that this sort of thing's been fixed up. You know, here we are in 2021 and we still have not plugged these holes. So that investigation by the Office of Local Government, Madam President, took some 2.5 years. And then we revealed in budget estimates that Mr. Dwahi's companies had been buying up options in a suburb of that LGA, Belfield, while he was sitting on council, involving himself in decisions which could potentially upzone. And I think that when people hear those sorts of things, they actually wonder, well, as my colleague says, it sickens people to understand that people would go into this for these sorts of reasons. And when you look at it, if you're an unethical person, and I don't for 1 minute think that any of us in this chamber come into this game for self-interest. I know all of you at some level. There's a good deal of goodwill here. People come in for the right reasons, by and large. We can't tar everyone with the same brush. But let's look at the economics, Madam President. You've got a situation where the average councillor probably gets, what, 20,000 a year in allowances? Now, unless you go in there for the right reasons, or you've got an alternative income source, there is a huge incentive to go in there for financial gain. Because if I'm only getting 20,000 a year on council and I'm a shonky character and I want to use that information that I am privy to, none of the community have access to such information about planning decisions which could result in significant uplift in values as a result of rezonings. Obviously, there's an incentive for an unethical person to take advantage of that. Blind Freddy can see this. So why would you pretend that by getting someone to fill out a declaration form, which as we've seen is not worth the paper it's printed on because the Office of Local Government can't even enforce that, why would you set up a situation which allows people to be in that situation where they can use their conflict for their own personal gain? And I just think that this is such a straightforward reform that people would expect us as a parliament to do the right thing and back it in. Yet, from the preceding debate to date, it appears as though the government is still resisting after all this time. As I said, this is the third attempt now legislatively. We've had the example of Mayor Dwahi. My colleague, the Honourable David Shoebridge, gave a couple of other examples that are going on around the traps. And it's not enough to have those examples manifest themselves. It's not enough to have the Dwahi case. We still want to defend the ability of people to sit. And the argument, one of the arguments we got is that people have a right to run for public office, and there's some sort of constitutional impairment on their ability to do that because people should be allowed to run for office and people should choose on the basis of freedom of choice. Well, my colleague, the Honourable Adam Searle, knocked that on the head. It's a fallacy, it's a fiction. That is not the issue, that is not an issue with this bill. So I'm interested to hear from the government as to why they're persisting on defending this bill. Why don't we just get this done, get it through? We're 3 weeks out from a local government election. Give the people of New South Wales some faith that your elected representatives actually care about the integrity of local government and the voting system, so that when they do go to the ballot box, they can have confidence that those people there don't have any conflict of interest. So they actually want to run for public office because they care about their area, the amenity of their area, and they want to represent the people who voted for them, not so that they can use privileged information on council meetings to subsequently profit from upzonings. That is not the system of local government we want to engender. And for every minute that a bill like this doesn't get passed, you are permitting legally for that thing to happen. And I think government members should think long and hard about that. And maybe, just maybe for once, a debate in the chamber might change your mind and you do the right thing and back the bill in. So I commend the bill to the House, and I ask you to change your mind and do the right thing on behalf of the people of New South Wales.